Hey everybody, welcome to my video. The reason that I'm putting this video out there is because, frankly, I'm outraged. I nearly lost £2,000 by the local garage trying to rip me off. And so I'm putting this video out there so that if you ever have a problem with your gearbox, or you've had a gearbox go wrong on you and you've been quoted a small fortune to have it replaced, then you can basically save money. And this is a story of how I did it and how you can too. Okay, how they tried to rip me off. Okay, well, when my gearbox went wrong, I, like most people, contacted the local garage and they said, we'll bring it in. So, okay, I thought I'll take it in, and I kind of spent 30 odd quid on taxes because I live out in the sticks, and I hadn't heard anything from them. So later that day, I gave them a call and asked what's wrong with it. And they said that they didn't know. And which was kind of frustrating, really, given the cost of the taxes and what have you, to actually be no further forward, having had them look at it. So I kind of thought, well, as so-called experts and with some fairly specific sort of symptoms, with it sort of jumping out of fourth gear and rocking out of third gear, then I really felt as if these guys should have known what they were talking about, and they didn't. And the next thing they asked for was £400, and I was thinking, why? And they basically wanted £400 just to look at it, and then went on to say, well, chances are you're probably going to need a new gearbox, and that's going to be at least £2,000. So these guys just didn't sort of score any credibility points with me, and I thought, screw that, there's got to be a cheaper way, there's got to be a better way, and fortunately there was. So I got looking on good old eBay, and I found a replacement gearbox for my car, which was an Audi A4 2.8 litre V6 Quattro, which, if you're not familiar with Audi Quattros, that's the four-wheel drive one. So, I kind of figured that it wasn't going to be a cheap repair, but I really didn't think it was going to be £2,500 like the local garage was quoting. So I gave this guy a ring who was advertising his gearbox on eBay, and he basically turned around and explained that there was two types of gearbox for my particular car, and that unfortunately the one that he was advertising on eBay wasn't the right one for my car, which was pretty unfortunate. But I thought, well, fair enough, the guy's being genuine. But then he turned around and kind of said, well, what's it doing? What's the fault? What's wrong? What's actually wrong with it? And so I explained that it was jumping out of fourth gear, and then when I changed sort of motion, decelerated or accelerate, you could see the gear stick rock backwards and forwards whenever motion changed. So he turned around and said, well, I'm 99.9% sure I know exactly what it is. I was like, okay. And he went on to explain that on the Audi Quattro gearbox, and I won't baffle you with jargon, but basically the gears 3 and 4 basically have their own drive shaft, and it's a floating drive shaft, which is sort of why it was making the particular sort of grinding noise when it was. So I kind of thought, well, crikey, this guy really knows what he's talking about. So the chap in question was called Ian, and he basically then went on to kind of say, well, it's pretty sure that it was the main bearing on drive shaft for gears 3 and 4, which made complete sense. And ta-da, instant credibility. I thought, how refreshing, this guy knows exactly what he's talking about. But it was really the next bit that completely blew me away. And that was basically the pricing. Ian turned around and kind of said, well, look, we'll get the gearbox out of the car, we'll fit the new bearing, and by the way, you're welcome to source the bearing yourself, or you can have us do it. And we'll basically charge you £150 for the repair and getting the box back in. So £150 plus the cost of the bearing. So that was just incredible. And it struck me that obviously, if these guys can get the gearbox out and do a repair or just inspect it, excuse me, I'm promise you I won't die and choke on this video presentation. But the owner was really cool as well. He collected me from the train station, which was pretty much well out of their way. But it was just sort of, just to me, indicated what a good bunch of guys they were, and they were just willing to go out of their way to help. Which, compared to my local garage, that was just sort of really acting like a sort of money leech that didn't really know what they're talking about, I was pretty happy. And these guys in question had me back on the road pretty quickly, and just sort of like the next day almost, I think it was. And compared to what the local garage was charging as a minimum, I saved £1,850 compared to what my local garage was sort of quoting as a bare minimum, which for me, I don't know about you, that's a fair old chunk of cash. So, what did I learn? Well, it's cheaper to get your gearbox repaired than it is to replace it. Most people, unless it's totally screwed, of course, but most people, when the gearbox goes wrong, or most garages, it's just like time for a new one. Well, that's not the case, and it certainly wasn't the case in my instance. So it pays to shop around, or it certainly did in my case, to the tune of nearly £2,000. So you're better off dealing with experts in gearboxes. And for these guys, that was all they did. They only do gearbox and transmissions, so they're sort of expert engineers in that field. And in my experience, local garages, they just don't have the same expertise when it comes to gearboxes. They tend to do a little bit of everything, and they're just going to want to put a new one on. They're not going to want to get their hands dirty and start fitting main bearings or any of the things like these guys did. Well, the big issue there is that it's going to be cheaper to deal with an expert that knows what they're doing, that can just replace the bit that needs replacing, unlike the local garage that are just quite casually happy to say, well, it'll be about £2,000. Well, it wasn't £2,000. It was more like 500 for me, which was great. So, these guys get my absolute highest recommendation. I'm obviously going to the effort of putting this video together because I was just so pleased about the money that I saved and the great job that they did for me, and just the great service that I got from them. So, if you've got a gearbox problem, and if anyone can help, just like the A-Team, these guys are called Jones Transmissions, and you can call them on 01902 711 733 or drop them an email, jonesgear@btconnect.com. And one thing I would point out, they're based in the West Midlands, near Birmingham and Wolverhampton in the UK. So, unfortunately, if you're based in the Outer Hebrides or Penzance in Cornwall or somewhere miles away, they may not be able to help. But if you're reasonably locally based, then chances are they'll probably recover you for free. So, if you've got a gearbox problem, I strongly recommend that you give these guys a call. They're absolute experts in their field, completely trustworthy and honest, and as I say, they get my highest possible recommendation. So I hope it helps you out if you ever have gearbox troubles. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.